So here we go, joysticks 101. So what's a joystick? To the computer, up and down, X and Y. And these joysticks, the Apple joysticks, refer to Atari because these joysticks have, you see I'm nervous now, these are called potentiometers, thank you very much, instead of switches. So whoever wants to use an Atari joystick, we're out of luck. You can use them, but they're very limited, and you can use a translator, and the translator, it do a fair job, but most games won't be able to take them. So, what breaks? That's the important thing. What breaks on the joysticks? Mostly just the switches. The potentiometers are the most common issue, and of course cables. A cable got disconnected, got cut. Those are the most important things, or the things that mostly get bad on the joysticks. So, the switches. Switches, and I'm showing the wrong one for this kind of thing. The switches that break a lot are actually the ones from the Apple joystick. And these switches get, I don't know why, with time they really get rusted, get bad. And you can really recover them, but you can put a lot of deoxide in it and just click it 1,000 times. It will work, but I've seen that with time they will go bad back again. So I recommend it to the Apple ones to replace them really faster. There are other kinds of joystick switches. I'm sorry, but most the ones that mostly get bad are the Apple ones. The ones from the CH are the other way. They're sturdy. They're very, very good. They're actually they're switches. They're computer switches, like the Apple II keys. So they're very, very strong, very sturdy, and I have never found one that doesn't work. So those are these. That's what I like. I like this. Okay, on the scale, the one that I most like is actually the CH. The CH for me is the tank, and it's the best of all of them. Why? Because it's very sturdy, it's very well made. All the components are really, really strong. And every time I fix one, they come up right away. And when you play with it, they're very elegant, they're very easy to use. You can really treat them bad, and they'll respond very well. So this is my favorite, of course. My second favorite is the Apple one. It's also very good quality. The only problem with it is the switches. But it's also very, very strong and powerful. Another thing that I like about the CH is the button on the top. There are games that you want to actually, do it with the two hands to kill the aliens or something like that. This is more difficult to do that. So, it's of course a matter of choice. Again, the things that break are the switches. The switches can be cleaned. It's hard. It's easier to replace. Some are key switches, and they're still available. They're Jameco and what other one? There's a couple of places that you can get them, and I'll send you the links to the places and the exact number. They have the exact replacement, so there's no problem of yeah, DigiKey and Mouser. You're right. Okay, this is another problem, potentiometers. And this is where I had the most problems, and a lot of times I kind of discarded some of the joysticks because I couldn't get it. Actually, I spent months trying to first replace them, get them from China. I bought different potentiometers, and every time I got them, they were or smaller, or they were thicker, or the connection was different. So I'd never been able to really find a good replacement for the Apple ones or for the CH. They are 150 something ohm, thank you, and they're hard to get, and the ones you get them are a lot smaller. They don't make them anymore. So I was really sad. I had a lot of these ones, but now I found the solution thanks to Sark. He taught me how to do it. He showed me, and since then I've been just cleaning and fixing all of them. And I'll show you how to do that. That's by adding a capacitor. Actually, I got to show it to you right now, and hopefully you can see it. We can see it at the end if you want. There's a capacitor in between those. Okay. And then when you put this over here, it actually will restore. Normally, the problem is that they get old, and they don't do the full 255. As you can see, oh, this is one of the programs that I use a lot, because, you know, there's a way to do it with code, but this is easier, you know. Computer Inspector, MECC Computer Inspector, and it shows you with a graphic where you can go, and 255. Normally, when the potentiometers are not good enough, they go all the way to like 211, 190, something like that, and they don't go farther. The same on the other ones. So when they do that, what you do is you add that little, what do we say it was? Capacitor. You know, I got some issues, but you know, I keep on forgetting. So you add the capacitor in between them, and voila, it goes immediately over there. Same here, it shows the button 1, button 2. So I love this one because I always connect it, and I have the joystick open, and I can move it around and see what's happening, and then just, you know, of course, test it and then disconnect it, because once I was dumb enough to begin to solder when it was connected, and my computer reset it. Thank God nothing happened, but you know, you gotta be careful. Learn it from me. I'm very good at breaking things. So again, that capacitor trick has restored almost all my joysticks. That comes to cables. So cables, I get a lot of broken connectors, broken internal cables, and DB19 and DB9 and 16 pin. I love the DB9. I don't like the 16 pin. I know it has, you know, history and all that, but it's really, those pins they bend very easily. It's more a pain than a pleasure to use them. So mostly what I do is when I get it, if they're complete, I try to just keep them safe. But if not, I just cut them and put a DB9 connector, because I use things. I don't just save them. So one of the other things that also you got to be very careful, I actually once found one of the joysticks had a cable broken like in the middle. And I have to move it like this for it to work. So I knew that there was a broken connector, and I had to go in there and cut it in, and then cut it, you know, patch them in between them again, and it worked again. So those are also some of the problems that you can find. The places that they broke most is near of course, the connector over here, or near the joystick, of course. One other thing that I've been doing, okay, diagnostic. How do you do the diagnostic? The first one is, of course, using your program, the MECC. I recommend it 100%. Always connected over there. You can do continuity testing. Continuity testing is, of course, with help there? Multimeter, there you go, thank you. With a multimeter, or you can put just a very easy thing like I do once. I did before I had a multimeter, I just put a battery with a little lamp, and then, you know, when you put them together, it lights up. So you just begin to play with it, and when, you know, to make sure that the cables, put it on one side, and then on the other one, you see if they really have continuity. Because if not, maybe caught in the middle of them. So start simple, use common sense, be careful, don't break things before it's not time for it to do. So again, the way to fix it, I thought it was more complex, and I'm going to show you at the end how they are. They're very simple things. Joysticks have 6 cables actually. So one is the ground, the other one is the power, and then we have 4 more, 2 for X and Y, and then 2 for the buttons. So it's actually very, very simple. And when you find out that, it will be easier for you to begin to figure out what's happening over there and what's the problem. For the switches, you just desolder the switches and resolder 1 feet at a time, so you don't put them, you know, the other way. So you desolder one side of the feet. It has 4 feet. Desolder these 2, take it out, and then solder the new one over here. And then when you have the new one over here, then desolder the remaining ones and put it back again. So that way you don't, oh, how was it? Oh, am I putting it correctly or something like that? Just do it simply and take time to avoid confusion, because I get confused very easy. So I hopefully you don't, but you know, just in case. Take a photo of the cables before starting. I always do that. I open the joysticks, take a photo of how it looks right now, take a closer photo, because sometimes I begin to disconnect things, and then, where was this cable in? And I don't remember how to put it in. So take a photo is very easy, and then, you know, you will remember, you will be able to find out things easier. Here it is. This is the information. Low potentiometers, that's 4700 MF capacitor, microfarad, between pot connectors to restore full strength. And that's what I just show you. This is like since Sark showed me that, I've been fixing like left and right, and everything has been a lot easier for me. That's like the main thing that happens with potentiometers. And because you cannot replace them, that trick will fix like 97% of them. Again, how to fix cables, resolder connections, test continuity, cut and reattach cable if needed. Replace DB9 connector with a new one. That's what I do, and that's one thing that I'm going to show you also. What I've been doing lately, and this is no secret or anything, the CH joysticks are very sought, and the Apple ones are expensive because people like them and they're very good and all this. But the little secret that up to today is not going to be any secret anymore is that there's a PC version, and they sell very, very cheap, and it's exactly the same joystick. It just have a different connector. So what I do is I cut it and I reattach it with a normal connect, the Apple II connector. I just put the right cables, and we're good. And lately, what I've been doing is actually I cut it on the side because this is rubber. So I cut it over here, take out the PC connector, and then I put the Apple II connector, and of course glue it. You will not have any screws anymore, but at least it will look almost original. If you don't know about this, you think this is an original one, and you have a beautiful joystick for half of the price. So that's what I've been doing, replacing the DB9 connector. And this is the diagram that I created because I don't understand, diagrams. So, people send me, oh yeah, look at this diagram, look at this other one, and I don't get it. I just want to see where the cable goes from here to here. And I made my own diagram, so it's very easy. I'm showing you what is the button 1, the 5 volts, x-axis, y-axis, the button 0, and the ground. And then where does it go on the joystick? And this is for all the joysticks. Sometimes only what it changes is the color of the cables. And actually, in the Apple II FAQ website that I have a couple of the diagrams with the exact colors of the CH and the exact colors of the Apple joystick. So you can just open those, and it's just the same kind of diagram. You just follow like that, put the cables like it is, and you got it working right away. So I think I went kind of fast, but I wanted you guys to see everything, how it works. I also wanted to show you adapters. There's a bunch of adapters, of course, for DB9 to the old 16 connector. There's actually, I've been playing also with new technologies, this is, I think, for the Nintendo or those little connector joysticks. You can make them work with an Apple II. You just got to put a bunch of those capacitors, and it will work just like a normal Apple II. We can pass this later too, so you can see it. Again, what I do is I have this little kit. So this is the connector that I use. It's a normal DB9 connector. This is the switch for the Apple joystick. It's a brand new one from Jamaica or all those other guys, and you just open it and replace it, and this is it. And what I wanted to have is more like questions and answers, and I want your feedback more than anything. So any questions?
So replacing the switch, I assume there's soldering involved.
Yep. But like I say, what you do is it's easy. You just desolder 2, move them, and then begin soldering these other 2. So take out 2, take them out, put this one, and then desolder the other ones and resolder. So you make it easy, so you don't forget and you don't lose or don't know what it is.
I assume you take the top of the joystick off.
Yeah. Oh, that's another thing. If you guys want to know, most of the joysticks they have the screws underneath, under the rubber feet. So you gotta just remove the rubber feet, lightly. Be careful. but it will get off. Oh, the Apple one has only two, and they're exactly not where I took it out, but you just took, of course, that's my luck. But Apple II has only two, and the CH has four. But most of them are underneath, and you just take them out, and you have it open, and there's everything in there. You can actually take everything out. Just gotta be careful, and again, take photos. That's what I do all the time, and that's because most of the time what happens is that you forget where the things were, and you see? Yeah, you can disassemble everything, and sometimes what I do is also when I restore them, I retrowrite them. Some of them are rusted over here. I take it off and I clean it, and make sure that everything is working well. Oil it sometimes a little bit. Make sure that everything is pristine, and test it a lot with the application.
What do you like to clean and oil it with?
I normally do deoxit for almost everything.
Deoxit?
Deoxit. So deoxit in the potentiometers, and just a little bit in the where it runs, but almost nothing. Just make sure, because sometimes some joysticks are really, really full of dirt and dust, and so what you got to do is clean them up really well, and then just a little bit so it really runs smooth. But they normally are pretty strong. Yep.
How much difference is there between like the CH joysticks in terms of like if you get two of them, are they going to be perfectly identical so you can just switch parts between them, or are there
Yep.
different
Yep.
models?
It's only color. It's only color.
Even between like the C1 and the
The only difference that I seen, and it's I think just aesthetical. Oh, do I have it here? I thought I had another one. Well, no. Oh yeah, there it is. So this is an original Apple one, and this is a PC one. And the Apple one doesn't have a couple of like a little holes with a little lever over there. But actually, I found out that doesn't work because you cannot really move it with your fingers. That moves when you move this little thing. So it's just, I think it's just the only difference. The PC, I don't know why they have those little holes over there. If you cannot even move them with your finger, you got to do it with that one. But that's the only thing. And you can interchange pieces, They're the same exact things, just different colors.
Javier, when you take off the rubber feet from the Apple one,
Uh-huh.
is it glued on? Do you glue it back on?
Yeah, sometimes it's glue. Sometimes it retains the glue. And sometimes, when you take it out, it goes. So it breaks. So the only thing you got to do is you got to use rubber cement, like the, in the future to put it back. I think there's one that's called 6000. That's what I use. It's like a gray one. And that rubber cement, it takes a little bit to dry, but when you put it in, it stays there. And next time you got to take it out, it doesn't break anything. It doesn't do anything. It's like rubber again. It's like, using it the same thing again. Other questions? Yep.
I have a joystick that was in storage for several years, and there were at least some games, like Robotron was one where you would use the joystick to move around and use the keyboard to fire.
Uh-huh.
You didn't have a second joystick. And some of the feet on the bottom of the joystick had melted
Good one.
while it was in storage. So now it doesn't sit flat to be able to move the joystick with one hand.
Yep. You can get replacements of most of them. The Apple ones, well, as you can see, the Apple ones and the CH ones are the same. And I have found them mostly on eBay. I heard that they sell them on other sites, but the guys from eBay they're called for Atari. They say it's Atari joystick feet, rubber feet. But it's
The ones on mine were square, and they were about a quarter-inch thick.
those are.
Much bigger than what you have on those.
I think those are very close to the ones that you have in your drives, Herbert. The square ones, rubber.
Yeah,
Where do you get those? Because I think those are kind of common.
I bought them at it's Active Electronics in Calgary. They're Active is just it's an electronic person in Canada. I'm sure you can find them.
Yeah, I think they're not that difficult to get.
They're not
Yeah.
It's not like there's an active specific product that, I can't remember the name of the brand name of the packaging, but it looks like a bluish kind of a card, with the bag on it.
The only ones that are very hard to get are there's one of the CH, the brown one. It has brown feet, and those brown feet are really hard to get. But those are the only ones that are the difficult ones. The black ones, you can find them almost everywhere. Yep.
So I have a joystick where one of the buttons seems to be like stuck down. Perhaps it's an adhesive, perhaps it's something wrong on the inside. Have you encountered this? And if so, how have you solved it?
No, I haven't, but most likely it's either broken, it has a little spring in the middle, maybe the spring is bad. You're gonna have to open it and either replace the whole thing or try to replace only the spring, of course. Yeah. Anybody? Yep. Up. And next to you.
Could you talk about how the centering springs work and
So great. Center spring is two little pieces of plastic over here that you move on the side. Sometimes they're very, and I'll show you over here. So it allows you to run free, or then when you put them back again, it will go back to the center again. And it didn't go all the way. There you go. And they're pretty sturdy. You know, after 30 years, they're still. And what it is, there's a couple of springs over there. I know you can see them. There's a spring over here and a spring over here. And when you move those little plastic things, they will just open the spring, so the spring doesn't force it anymore. And then when, of course, you let it go, it will force it again to center. So it's mechanical. And they're pretty sturdy. I've never found one that is bad. And when you find one that is like that, it's just like it was popped out or the spring went out, but you just put it again and it works.
you ever find a trim pot that's broken or
Just dirty. I broke pots trying to fix them before the potentiometer fix. I actually tried to open them and try to clean them, and when I put them together, they never work again. So they're very, very delicate. I would never recommend to. I've seen people that open them and clean them up and all that, but on my experience, it's very advanced. What I try to do is, the most thing I do is I put some deoxit on the side and just move them to make sure that it kind of clean. I heard that because it has like a carbon on top, that carbon, begins to wear out, and you got to replace that carbon. How do you put carbon in a piece? It's very complex. So better try to just fix it like that. And again, I broken actually potentiometers with that. Yep.
I'm just curious, have you or will you maybe create a video actually showing beginning to end this assembly spring?
I've done them.
Soldering and
I've done it in my Hubmaster YouTube. I have a couple of them. That the only problem is that creating videos like this, it's a little bit tedious, to be honest, because it takes a long time to disassemble things, and you got to do things very closely. And when you got a camera, you try to move some things, and you get in front of the camera. So I can do it.
You're still photogenic.
Yeah, no, I'm not. That it's not about me. It's about the joystick. Yeah. So, and I put my hands over there, and it's hard to make videos like on small things like that. But yeah, I'll do another one. Yeah, no problem. But yeah, sure.
This is invaluable, but actually seeing the full process.
Sure.
You should check out your videos, but that would really help.
Yeah.
Someone that's never done it feel more comfortable approaching.
Sure. And again, you can also send me messages or anything like that. There's people actually that send me their joysticks to get fixed. But I try to people to learn it. The other things that I do is, again, I'm going to convert this one. This is from Dave. I'm going to convert this one for Apple II, and it's very easy. Just cut the cable, put the.
And you'll sell it to him.
Yeah, and I'll resell it to him. No problem. And these are good too. The only thing I don't like is they don't have a button in the middle. That's personal thing, But these buttons are pretty good always. So most joysticks are very sturdy. I don't like some of them, like the KC3, because the plastic is kind of cheapy, and when they break, it's mostly the electronics, and I don't like that because you got to be fixing the electronics. And I'm not very good at that, so I prefer these things that are almost half mechanical, and they're very, very strong. You know, you drop them and no problem. I'm not gonna drop them bad, you know. Other questions? Yep, sorry.
So who was this joystick we were in Mexico City?
Well, I don't know. That was weird. But that was fun, huh?
Yeah, no, what about using like null modem cable, but with the 9-pin connector, can you just cut that off and just replace
Yeah.
the cable?
Well, you gotta again, you gotta make sure that it has. Oh, that's another very good point. Some joysticks, you can see that they're missing. When you see inside, they're missing connectors, because some people, you know, they only need 6 connectors. So you gotta make sure that the connectors on the connector match the ones that the joystick are gonna use. So be careful the pins, because I tried once. I was talking to Charles. He sent me a mouse cable, and I wanted to replace it for a joystick, and the pins didn't match, so I couldn't make it work. So that's very, very important. Yep. Well. Yeah. Just redo everything. Other questions? I think we're good. Now let's tell Javier. Okay, you gotta go, Javier. Thank you very much, guys. And any question you can ask me offline. All right, we got 5 minutes more.
That was really good. Yeah. You know, and listening to your listening to your talk was the line I got from you, where I told you if I dislodge it to, you know, release the tension. It sounds like the spring thing, where it's maybe off center or something, and I'm sure that's what it is. So as long as I don't release it, it's fine. But I'm afraid to release it, and I didn't think to bring it here to have you look at it. But maybe, maybe I'll just bring it next year. Sure. And if I don't bring it. But does that seem logical that maybe the spring would be off center? Maybe something a little bit. Although if I bring it next year, would you be bringing any potential? And this soldering thing you mentioned?
You were not here.
I look forward to maybe they did that.
That's going? You're learning all the spots. You're learning all the AV.
Thank you.
I told Steve my slogan for AV at Kansasfest, which is you had to be here. Maybe you should have shown it. Okay, so I guess this guy is yours. Yeah. So speaking of surgery, and I'll tell Steve that. You know, I can have Jordan send me the secret crap he uploaded, and then use the audio from the recording and just switch to it for that portion. Steve, just so you know, so you don't do what I do, cry at night, is I can just contact Jordan, get the shots of the cool shit that he had, and then use the ambient, switch to the ambient, and use it as a slideshow.
Yeah, we
So
can do
there's
that
always
if
ways to
necessary.
save.
Yeah.
Never get hung up on, oh no, it's gone. Always
Okay.
ways.
Okay.
Always.
Yeah. Am I also announcing? I'm happy to do it. He could announce. Okay. Yeah. Use this one. Whichever one you want to use. Pick some like.
So you can just check your whole point is just check your.
Do a.
Just announce me, dude.
Also joystick that you can connect to our PC. So we just saw it open the.
Oh, you want joystick?
We don't have an audience mic, so good. Sure. So if you can repeat what people ask.
Locked off the end.
The stream it.
Because I got stream. I can do it.
Because nobody wants a PS2 joystick.
Keep an eye on me. Give me a warning at 3:30, just in case I'm a little. I'm either going to be really short-ish or really long. I don't know. What am I?
I like the fact
What am I about?
they're releasing the shielding.
What time is it?
304.
My goodness.
The problem with shielded cable is if you don't.
All right, Mechner.
All right. Should you're gonna present them? Okay.
Next up is. Very good. Next up is Mr. Jason Scott. He has an update on the Internet Archive.
Is my voice as beautiful as it's supposed to be across this? No. We're not. I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for me. Is everything?
Check your.
Am I overdriving the thing? Am I not logged in?
Yeah.
Is that good? Don't break my heart. This is
Can't see it.
this is the kind of top grade pro audio setup I want. Like that. Oh, so much better. Always check everything. Nothing will go right. Remember the slogan of the Kansasfest AV team? You had to be there. Anyway, so, hi, I'm Jason Scott. This is called What a Difference Every Year Makes. It's just an update for the work I do, for the institution I do, along with some generalized thoughts, quickly veering into a black hole maelstrom of theoretical outlook towards future, because that's what I do. How many people here have no idea who the heck I am? You're just here, this is your thing. Okay, that's what I figured. So this is a meme from shrimp farming communities. And the reason I'm mentioning is because every community has its own very specific aspects and its own pieces and its own in-jokes and its own memes. And so never get hung up. My advice to anybody who's in any small community is just never get hung up on this and that and think that this is some unique high or low, because we've all got our interests in this world and we're all trying to get by and we're all having a good time. Anyway, so my name's Jason. This is me when I'm like 16 years old, and that's me when I was 25 years old, and that's me when I was 28 years old. That's me when I was 35 years old. This is me when I'm 38 years old. This is me now. So I've just done a whole bunch of stuff involving archiving and history and pieces and things like that. So I'm always involved. If there's any theme to my life, it's been that I take a lot of weight in our cultural history, primarily digital, and preserving as much of it as possible for others to regard, laugh at, learn from, and otherwise do it. And I've noticed over and over again that it only takes the effort of a few small individuals to be critical in keeping things around. It can be the difference between one person looking at a pile of boxes and saying, maybe we should take this home before they knock this building down. And that's the difference between why we know this movie was ever made or why this project was ever done. So sometimes it can feel very lonely when other people tell you things are junk or that they're not relevant, and then later you find out that you were the savior of an entire cultural piece. This has been something I've learned over and over again. Last year, I was in this car in Austria. The reason I was in there was because I was shooting a movie. So I'm in my first fictional movie, professional movie acting. I look like this in the movie. That's my partner, Rachel, who I never talk about because I like to protect people who are near me, but that's Rachel, and she's more than happy to be with me, and she is my everything. I work for this dump. It's called archive.org. This is how most people see it on the front page. This is actually what it looks like. It's a crazy building that my boss, who has a lot of money from .com stuff, said he wanted to buy a building that looked like his logo. It has no functional reason to exist like it does, but we're there. And in there are a whole variety of glorious online piece is most people know it as the Wayback Machine. That's well over half of our traffic, and so most folks use us to look at Yahoo in 1999, or to verify somebody said something they claimed they didn't, or to be able to find their own embarrassing part of childhood that they thought was gone. Anyway, primarily what's interesting me these days is turning the physical into the digital, taking things that people don't consider valuable and turning them digital. That goes across a whole bunch of medium, but for the purposes of this crowd, it is 5 1/4 and 3.5 inch floppy disks. And I have been living that life at full speed in the last couple years. So I have been donated lots and lots of properties. Here's the Corpus Christi Apple Users Group stuff in 1986 that was just sent to me in a big box. Because the narrative for folks is they want to keep things, and then when they get to a certain point, be told that it was good they did this and that they do not have some sort of disease. And so I'm there to give them that final dun-dun before they throw it out, to say, you know what, a museum, a nonprofit, a library wants your stuff. You've done good, warrior, you may rest. You can have that closet, that basement, that attic left to your own devices now, knowing that it was the scene of a saintly act. So people have been sending me the final chapter of their keeping of old material, especially, like I said, floppy disks. I love getting floppy disks. And the thing is, it's one thing to have the floppy disks, and I've scanned sleeves, I've scanned in labels, I have transcribed many handwritten things, and put them online. So, you know, it's the same thing behind it as in front. The white window are the disk images of what's in that little bin, and the black window in the back is me transferring them from my home machine up into the Internet Archive stacks. So at this moment, it exists in 3 physical locations and 2 different media. And again, it is 100% content agnostic. I have long ago moved away from having favorites, of saying, well, this is a Broderbund, this is obviously valuable, this is a handwritten thing that says plot test Mr. Lee's teacher disc, and saying this is not valuable. To me, it is all valuable. My job is not to be the gatekeeper. I don't want to be cursed out in 2030. I mean, I'm going to be cursed out in 2030, but not for that. This is one of my typical boxes. So the software collection, for people who wonder, goes into a shipping container inside of a warehouse. Each one of those is 5 feet by 5 feet by 5 feet. I have 21 of them, and it's of software and books, and so that's where it all goes. It's gone from here and from many other locations. Then I try to make them live again, because I believe that entire realms of physical material turned into digital is just another form of that. So this is the logo of what's now called the emularity. The emularity is that thing where you go to the archive, there's a little logo, and it boots an Apple II in a window, which, as I predicted, and I'm very happy that my prediction came true, went from miraculous to banal horse crap in about 2 years. The pros and cons, the fact that it's a little bit hard on older boxes, that it's a little scratchy on some machines, that there's no way to put a second disk in quite yet, and that needs to be repaired and upgraded, was about a year, from oh my God to this thing. It functions and continues to function as the critical preview to me of this material we're doing, the ability to instantly look at the thing we're looking at without turning up a whole process. I was incredibly happy to see NetDisk. How many people here were not here for the NetDisk announcement and the new products announcement? So basically, this wondrous piece of work takes a URL of a disk image on an Apple II GS, you click on it, and it is now a mounted disk on your desktop, utilizing an Ethernet connection, a completely insane from space operating system upgrade. And it will then allow you, that's neat, but then it will allow you to do a search on the Internet Archive for a title. So your library on your Apple II GS just expanded up by tens of thousands of disks, none of which cost you any time. I know that there are other plugins out there. All right, I theoretically have no idea what the people are talking about, but I have heard rumors of modules that click into the massive stores of the Internet Archive and create downloadable menus, downloadable works, enabling you on your set-top box or your home computer to just have the world's largest software library and just function in it. This is perfectly fine from my point of view, Your Honor. The place is completely available to be used as a storehouse. It does not have to be the gatekeep. You don't have to have our cute little format and our piece and what all that means. You're fully capable of using it however you wish. That was part of the dream, not limiting. I continue to have the debate of why are you not in jail? It's boring, but I understand it. The amount of companies from the Apple II community who have tried to punch my lights out has been happily small. Happily small. First Star Software really likes Boulder Dash. And the reason why is because it's still a mobile app. So they have now sold, for anybody who didn't have it immediately go off on their pager when this news hit, First Star Software has sold their back catalog to a mobile company in the last year. So Spy vs. Spy, Astro Chase, Boulder Dash, and the other one I've never heard of have been sold to a mobile company. This either means that Astro Chase comes to your phone or nothing. I'm not sure. Funny fact, I used to live 1 mile from First Star Software. I don't know how that happened. But they were more than happy to call me to tell me to take down Boulder Dash. On the other hand, there is currently a massive Boulder Dash collection on the Internet Archive. The other one is Epix. I don't know how many people know this, but a Bible software company owns Epix. And the reason I even know that was because I had an altercation with another entity who claimed that they owned the ability of a certain platform to boot an entire type of computer. And I said, that is objectively ludicrous. And they said, we don't think it's ludicrous. And we went, well, we do think it's ludicrous. And they went, and that's about where it stood. But on the way out, he went off and told the Bible software company that their precious Summer Games 2 was sitting around earning untold sums of money at this library. So anyway, Summer Games 2, Jumpman, and all that are technically owned by a company that I can assure you does not care. Like a baron who just found out in his 12th year that he owns a golf club. Like no connection to it whatsoever, but they sent me a letter and so it's down. Anyway, don't put Summer Games 2 on your website, I guess. Anyway, so that's been about it though. That's nothing compared to many of these others. Atari and I are on a first name basis. Capcom and I are not sending each other any Christmas notes anytime soon. Nintendo. And there's, lots of other places who have all varying degrees of belief of what a library is and what we should do. There's currently a war being fought on the librarian scale. It's no secret, except for people who think it's a secret, that publishers hate libraries. Publishers really hate libraries. And they hate them more and more each time. They've just started to embargo ebooks. So what that means is that most of the big names now are doing what they used to do the videotapes, which is they will not sell an ebook to a library. They had an usurious cost before for libraries, where they were literally charging $100 for 50 Shades of Grey plus each use for 2 weeks for X amount. And now they won't even let those libraries have the ebooks for 8 months after publication. So there's a war being fought. I'm with a really weird side. We are the bizarre freemen of the distant realms of the library because we're funded privately. But that's going on out there. Anyway, all that matters to you is there's lots of cool crap out there. So cool crap is stuff like this, where I am grabbing all of these old junk mails and having them scanned. And there's a site called the Ted Nelson Junk Mail folder that is just full of all of these incredible realms of old 60s, 70s, 80s computer technology engineering, and there's just so much story and aesthetic here. You know, each page is like a brand new realm of like, what were we thinking? And you know, and of course for some people here, they're like, oh, my old Hitachi. But for most people, it's like, oh my God, this is from space. But I'm mostly here for this little guy, and this little guy. When I'm trying to explain to people like the massive expansion that happens with the Apple II and the amount of which, like this is still an Apple II in the same way that like V'ger is still a little satellite. It is an extremely modified entity built on a framework, and that indicates a continued lifeblood in that community and that work and that piece. The economics may not work out for everybody, and they may be really weird. Like it feels like a lot of our products have to be done in a potluck sort of way of like, we're all going to round up, we're going to go out, posse comitatus, and we're all going to go grab. Each one's going to come running in with $150, and together we're going to make a thing that should not be, and we're going to buy it. But regardless, there aren't many other communities doing that level. Like some of them are replacing vital parts. You can still buy brand new iRobot and the other one by the same guy, Quantum controllers, these unique one-of-a-kind controllers, and they have to machine them and sell them for $85 a piece. So there's some of that in other places, but I don't know. I think this place is the king. Again, still love everything about the concept of the entity of the Apple II. What's important to me, I'm in a lot of places, again, think shrimp farming, but I'm delighted by the fact that we have done a top-up job of preserving the physical, technical, personal, and cultural context of the Apple II computer and continue to keep it alive and revisit it. Not many communities really do that. Things become very divested and spread out, and things become concepts, but there's still a very strong bond. It's mostly unique. In terms of that, you can see the progress of technology in terms of spinning pieces of dying mold squares into a program. And so you start out with something like this ADT, and I'm worried now that we're actually going to get to the part in the Apple II community where ADT falls off the map as a recognized, incredible piece of work that it is. Just an amazing fact of not only does it transfer disks from a regular Apple over to your piece of garbage, but it will also take itself in by attaching. You can actually take your laptop's audio out, plug it into the cassette of an Apple, and it will feed it a boot program that will then pull the rest of the program down quickly to boot it up. Like that level of bootstrapping of like, I picked this thing up just like that, upside down, underneath some baked goods at a garage sale. I was able to plug something in and hook it up to one of my monitors, and you can still get to this, which means you can write disks out once you get over the culture shock of what do you mean it doesn't have a disk drive. But once you do that, it'll work. So, and he's kept it going, like it's been functionally running very well. My only problem is I am trying to slim things down. I no longer want an Apple II on my desk because I'm pulling in from so many different things, and it's very bulky. So that's where we were, and we can still go back to that. It works functionally, and it produces this, right? It produces a pile of 140K images of programs with names that can go into an emulator or an online emulator, or Cider Press, which is another miraculous piece of work, which enables you to analyze and go over and regurgitate all the material. But then we get into the problem of there's more to the software experience. The packaging, the protection, there's like about 9 different vectors of what we're looking at here, both the artwork and the experience, along with the fact that sometimes the discs have gone through multiple sleeves. This is something of interest, the label is of interest, it's starting to fade. So there's all these other vectors. For some people, they just want to boot up their EasyWriter. Why? But you can do it. And to VisiCalc, the proof of VisiCalc is a very important
piece of software history, so you want to do it. So this is an experience that ADT can't do. And so it can pull in some of it, but it really can't pull in all of it, right? So there's people out there. And what they've done is you've got this interaction with something like the applesauce. Now the applesauce, the applesauce is somebody came to a knife fight with a nuclear bomb. And it's an incredibly over-engineered piece of material for what it needs to do, which is somebody has a commodity piece of coalition of Japanese and California technology that has been remixed into being able to read off of this little piece of plastic, and it says, well, what if we attached an electron microscope to it and pulled out 20 megabytes of its data? It once again proves, you take long enough time, you will end up with this, right? This is an unfair advantage to the software duplicator. You are aware of the full function of the disk. You can visually see what's going on. You're pulling from a 20 megabyte overview of it. You keep that because you're crazy and space is no object comparatively. And then you run a machine that is 1,000,000 times faster than an Apple II against that pile of data to let you know that it can now boot Apple Panic, definitively. And then there's this, and that's a whole other debate. The concept of metadata and context. Hi, John. This is a halting first step in a wayward journey that may or may not have a happy ending, but I appreciate the effort. Whenever you're dealing with metadata, the problem is that there is a constant problem of structure booting up against other structures because there is no universal metadata format here. There are library systems, there are cataloging systems, there are scientific classification systems. They all hate each other. If you put them together, you don't get a baby. You get two brown and black puddles. So you will always have, it's more like thanks, but it's not I don't want people to not take actions because they're terrified that they won't enter metadata correctly. I would never want somebody to not image their rare program because they're not sure if it's 83 or 84 because it says 83 or 84 on it, or whether Sensible Software or Sensible Software Incorporated said it. Don't sweat it. Please don't sweat it. What's important is the data, and I'm going to go way down a hole very shortly about that. All that matters to me is there's a 20 megabyte worst family photo ever of just 20 megabytes of this poor piece of plastic that can be manipulated to the ends of time. For anybody who has not interacted with this, a lot of people have, maybe they haven't. It's applesaucefdc.com. It is my current highest endorsement for imaging the Apple II. You will spend money to do it. It will cost you hundreds of dollars, but you will also be able to hook up a drive to it with some modifications and be able to produce these from your collection. No Apple II is required. It hooks up to a Macintosh, and it pulls down the data and then writes it out into a format called WAS, or if it's capable, these other more non-protected versions. But you should never get rid of the A2R, the original Flux image. You just want what works here. The advantage of the WAS, even though it's just another format or the latest format, is that this one is much more cognizant of copy protection. And what that means is that now that all the emulators, pretty much all the emulators support it, with other ones apologizing for not, as opposed to telling you to go screw that you should, is that it will perfectly emulate the experience of the floppy. And again, whether or not your life is one in which you ever got to see the title of the game Sabotage or not, that's up to you and your superior being, but it's good to know the option is there where before it did not. And we have a lot of programs that people thought were canonically captured for all of time, and it turns out, no, they weren't. It turns out we actually didn't have digital copies that were dependable of games like Sabotage and Choplifter and so on. We had cracked versions, modified versions, versions that were stripped down, but we did not have the actual experience as it came out of the box in 1983. So, good. Life would have been fine with the cracked versions, but it's wonderful to appreciate what we have now. So if you're somebody who's out there who's looking at this, who's like, what? Great. We take all of the fluxes that are in my area of influence, and I encourage people to upload them to the Internet Archive. We now currently have, I believe the current number is 12,000 individually fluxed Apple II floppies on the archive, all downloadable and viewable, but not bootable. They're just there. These are meant to be the, I have discovered, and this is the hard one thing as 8 years now at a frontline professional archivist, is a lot of people want to push you to the side during your tour to get down into the box of the real junk so they can do their real work. And I always encourage having a, here's before I messed with it, pile of all your data. So they can go do it because you're terrible because you're not them. Let them go in, let them get super hung up on the thing that they care about. Leave it there for them. Don't get in their way. Let them do it. And so these fluxes are here for anybody who wants to do an experiment, who wants to do research. As you can already start to surmise, there are patterns in these things. They indicate, I have watched 4 AM and others look at a flux, nothing up my sleeve, and go, Broderbund copy protection style. So we're already to that point that people are like, aha! That's a vintage Gustafson. Ah, yeah. So we have also discovered silent versioning, which is where all the packaging says the same thing, the version says the same, but it's not. So that's happening. That leads to a syndrome I don't want to go into, but you should be aware that there is not a bad side to, if you have the time, imaging everything, even though we have it. Because sometimes we'll discover we don't have it. Even at this event, we've found demo versions, like stripped down demo versions of programs. It's kind of neat to see what they think. I try to bring the world into what we do. So I stream on Twitch. So I am currently Twitch's leading live streaming computer archivist. And so I'm in the arts and creative section. And I live stream ripping CDs and floppy disks and other pieces. Try to inform what people are doing. I let Whiz bless it, and they watch as this works, and I get hit. Twitch just incorporated something called, okay, let's go back here. Who knows what Twitch is? All right, so that's not everybody. Twitch is the latest gamer-oriented live streaming service. There have been others, but this is the one. It's currently owned by Amazon, but it basically wants you to, when you hear about gamers doing live shows, they are running, like here's them playing, and sometimes it has their face on it, and they have people chatting, and they get to give kudos, and they have ads on it, and they spend day in and day out playing, responding, and then asking for either money or for other prizes, and they build up audiences and influence and live the celebrity lifestyle for a few of them. And I looked at that and said, flux capacity reading, that would be the thing to do. Nobody knows what to do with it. You can see the Beagle brothers carefully watching. Soon. And I usually get anywhere between 100 or 200 people a day who watch me doing it. And then there's this thing called raids now. And what that means is that if you're a streamer who has like people on your stream and you're going to end your stream, you can choose another stream and just shove your audience at them. So that's happening to me more. Like I'm watching streamers who are playing games like, and now Apple II reading, because they're not giving it to a competitor, because I'm not their competitor. So they're like, they're basically blasting closing time from the speakers with the lights up at the end of their show. Closing time, and then Apple II imaging. And I get these kids who are like, they're about as old as the idea of Twitch itself, going, hey, what's this? What is, and remember, it's not just, whoa, is that what I think it is? It's, what is this? What is any of this? What is happening? Why? Anything. I don't get it. And then I start to explain it to them, and then they're like, that is breathtakingly odd. Like just that view, right? If somebody was like, what are you doing? I'm sending fish to space. Real fish? Yeah, real fish. Space? Space, yeah, breaks the barrier. And then maybe I'll talk about rocket fuel, and I'll be like, rocket fuel? They're like, awesome, wow, rocket, but wait a minute, fish to space? Because they have no connection to the games, they have no connection to the history, the culture, it's meaningless to them. All they know is I'm doing something very interesting with machinery. So, and then I'll explain what we're doing and what we're up to, and I talk about this thing and so on, and I give pieces. And so it's an educational outreach, and it's very effective because a lot of this work I'm doing is kabuki theater to encourage people to know that A, there's a thing called the Apple II, 2, there's a community, 3, there are things that are valuable that are part of it, and 4, you might know somebody who does. And more people have come to me and said, oh, I saw the stream, or somebody told me about it, and you take old floppies, do you want 400 floppies? A question I love getting. I guess. Anyway, so the WAS format is the latest step. Every format thinks it's the last format. And the history of formats, I don't want to debase it by giving you my stupid summary of it. I think there's if somebody who's new here is like, what do I do? Go ahead and give a talk next year about like the history of Apple II transferred formats. Because it's deep and rich, and there's enough people around who will talk about it on the Slack and go into this piece and that. And I think there's a real advantage for you there. So free for you. That one's for free. This is where I get excited. Passport is now a Python program that was announced years ago, but one of the things that does is that gets, I prefer to work in Unix and Ubuntu working through command line interactions. I do an average of 4,000 or 5,000 transactions with the Internet Archive a day. So they need to be command line and they need to be scripted. So whenever anyone produces a beautiful graphic version of something, I'm like, that is absolutely irrelevant. And I need the thing that makes me go like this 100,000 times. And Passport will allow me to do that because buried in Passport is the ability to take an A2R and turn it into a WAS. If it can take an A2R and turn it into a WAS, it can take anything and turn it into anything. It is able to take a reading of disk geometry, convert it, and then make a thing that boots. Like, it has to. That's what it has to do. And what we've discovered is that the applesauce is so over-engineered, it doesn't care if a Commodore, Tandy, or Atari disk is put in it. It will read it with the same level of detail, and it will produce an A2R that works. My goal by next year is to have the applesauces reading Commodore, Tandy, and Atari disks to the point that I can shove in the disk and not look at the label. So that's my current plan. We'll see how that works. I have to find a programmer who's comfortable with Python and who wants to deal with the crankiest developer on earth. And right now, so I've got this whole idea about the blorb, and I've been talking a little bit about the blorb. People who are, I have a podcast, and the podcast has me talking about the blorb. Some of this you'll know already. So the blorb is me, like right now we are in a golden era of turning these plastic death squares into angelic files. But reason for that, and we're doing it, right? And we're going at a very fast rate. Many of you have seen the pile upstairs. There are other piles. They are being pulled down very quickly. The WAS format and the ability to image disks hits the world on basically May 8, 2018, maybe June, March, depending on who you are and whatever. But it's literally like 2 people can do it in March, a few people can do it in May, couple people can do it in June and July. So that's where we are now, and we're already at known 12,000 fluxes. So we already are there. Plus disks images where we didn't flux them at all because we knew, tough jump, but we knew that they were not in need of being fluxed because they were pure data on the disk. That is very powerful, but it also means that we are going to run out of disks. Because if we're running at that speed, we're going to run out of disks. And when that is, whether it's in 1 year, 5 years, or 10 years, we are going to run out of disks. We will evacuate the number of people who are comfortable having these things exist. That's why I also want to go after the other formats, and we will hit this thing. At that point, we have a corpus of the experience of the human spirit portrayed 140K at a time. And what happens then? How many times can you boot sneakers? How many times can you play VisiCalc to prove what? I don't know. But that's that's the deep philosophical piece of what's there. What do you do with this digital piece? And I've been working on the archive now. It used to be the case, if you count people I've influenced and assist, I am a significant small percentage of the Internet Archive's total corpus. Like, I'm one of the petabytes. Because I have been telling everybody, come on in, bring it. 1,200 VHS tapes digitized? Sure. Piles of manuals? Bring them in. Piles of spec sheets, radio shows, magazines, technical properties? Bring them in. And as a result, there are well over a couple 100,000 items that I'm somewhere in there on. And then they put me on spam duty. But spam duty for me quickly turned into classification duty. And classification duty is much more interesting. So I have personally moved 1.5 million items around the Internet Archive in the last year. And what that means is that I now know what's coming in and how people are interacting with it, and I know where that's going. And I'm very excited. And I realized that instead of thinking about individual items that people get very hung up on, have we scanned them and have we put them in, I have now just declared the entire corpus of digital humanity as something I call the blorb. And the blorb does not care what anything is. To you, silly apes, this is a series of magazines, but it is also an entire packed, loaded set of Dutch computing history, Dutch publishing history, font formats, the ability of humans to read, the ability of us to transfer information, digitization process. It is like overloaded with all of this other extant information that a machine or a person manipulating a machine can use for all of time or until we blow ourselves up. So we're not going to blow each other up for like at least a few weeks. So we've got time. And there are these things in here. And the reason I put it here in Dutch is because I don't want you to get hung up on what he's saying. It's the functionality of these pages. Like, this is a thing to you. This is how in 1982 they're expressing programs, how they're doing screens. And then there's this, which I think was somebody's idea in the printing process of being cool, like Wired, but it's stupid. And then here's this stuff, and your brain says this means it's program, because this is a text. Why? Why is that? Why is that typewriter a thing? And then this is a typewriter, but it's a different typewriter, and it's a format. Machines don't care. What we have here is kids using an Apple. And there is the part of us that is using this and wants to experience this again or wants to experiment with it and learn. But to me, there's something about the fact of the actual digital context of it's meaningless whether or not this formatted thing is anything. And this is a whole bunch of signals for machine analysis. We are going to head to a point where things like the Apple sauce are generating massive digital files that are going into the Internet Archive. But we are also being given other machines. So this thing, which does anybody know what this is? Yeah, this is a Domesday Project reader. It was originally in the same way the space shuttle was created because somebody wanted to get a pizza really fast, I guess. It would be like that. There was one project that the Brits made that was meant to be a future-proof capture of history, and it was called the Domesday Project, and it was saved in a ridiculous format that was stupid. So the Domesday Project, within 10 years, is unreadable. So one of the highlights of this embarrassment is that funding and efforts have gone to resuscitate the information from the dead formats to be able to bring it back. So this is that, using commodity hardware because we're turning China into the 19th century of industrialism, and we're allowing these things to be built that are doing reading. But this is to laser discs what the applesauce is to floppy disks. And so when it reads, it doesn't mess around. It pulls in the signal and it evaluates it. Now you as a person see this thing and you go, oh, video signal, thank you for that. But the Domesday is going right down to the full signal and reading it all the way down at an incredible sample rate to the point that they can begin to notice drops and then write code to make that drop go away. So it doesn't just pull it in, it can take the raw flux and repair it, certainly for the human eye, and possibly even better than that. This is the future. People then figured out that the Domesday project doesn't, or the Domesday machine thing, doesn't care that it's a laser disc. Why not be anything? So that's when they aimed it at a video tape. And this is what came out of a videotape. So this is pulling out of a videotape an enormous amount of information, everything from the decoded offline code that's being sent along with it, being able to, which is there here being interpreted, all of the magnetic data in between at a resolution that's much, much higher because it's super sampling it, which means you can have votes to go, good, good, I think we're going to go with good, which means you can theoretically produce better versions of what's being saved. So you can look at it. We are now getting further and further along. And so that's why I say when you look at things like this Hitachi computer, this is very important, but I also think this is very important. That this is a portrayal of destruction because of mold that was on this particular document. And the concept of mold will be used both to remove mold and to add mold as we need to. And we are moving towards a place where this is the original Doom texture, and this is a machine-assisted upscaling of that exact same file. So we are now getting to the point that machines are able to augment to our pleasure the context of everything. Well, if you can do it with video, you can do it with audio. So in the future, I think there will be a financial run on pre-copyright 1920s music because they will be able to say to a machine, take samples from 1970s songs, the experience of the room, the experience of the things, make it sound like it was recorded in a 1970s studio with the stereo and the, I think we will be there within the next 5 years. And so in the meantime, we have toys. And so, for instance, there's this thing called 8-Bit Workshop. And 8-Bit Workshop enables you, among other things, to work with an Atari 2600 and program in the language with code highlighting and with the instant output, constant recompiling and playing of this cartridge and then manipulating it for free right now. I believe we will see this on the Apple Work stuff we will do. We will manipulate disks in real time. We will tell our machines to do things they're not supposed to do. We will live do it. I want some of this to come into the emularity. Other people have done it with versions of the emularity. I want the archive to do it where you can change out the sound cards, you can change out the video, you can start running it on different monitors, and so on. I think we're going to get there. I'm very excited about where we're going. And so I think that I have come to love the Blorb. The Blorb's growing, it's flexible, it's universal, and I'm telling people to kit bash the Blorb. Do not pause at the lines and special little edges we gave for ourselves at the ends of the pages and the text and the files that they were supposed to be. Start hitting them on every direction. Experiment with them. Send signals through them they're not supposed to. Simulate them, modify them, turn them into filters. Be excited. Get involved. Help me find as much of the analog world to make it as digital as possible. I don't care what format it's in anymore. I don't care what's happened to it. I'm absolutely excited and full of life about it. And one other thing, I wasn't feeling well in May. I couldn't figure out why. I was really annoyed. I went to the hospital. I'm like, I don't feel well. My doctor was like, yeah, you're fine. I said, nah, I don't believe you. I went to the emergency room. They said, you're kind of fine. I said, I don't think so. They're like, fine. They did a nuclear stress test on me, and one of the arteries was 99% blocked. So that night, they opened it up, not 100%, but 99%. since I had my last heart attack a year and a half ago or 2 years before that, that tells me I do two things. I generate drama and cholesterol. And one of the side effects can be morbidity, but it's more to me a realism. So one of the things I've definitely been functioning along is that I am very obviously playing a game of Missile Command, and I've still got all 3 cities, but it is very obvious there are a lot of missiles coming down. I'm going to be upping my, my I'm joining the colonoscopy club. I'm just going to get all the fun. A few people went, yeah, I know. But I'm taking it very seriously, and I have a diet that's, ideal for that. But one of the things it's done for me is provide me with that clarity of just do stuff and don't get hung up on small things. So most of my storage is now either with the archive or with institutions. I have a very small amount of stuff that I actually keep, so none of it depends on me. All of my institutions, the archive teamwork that I do, the Internet Archive and work, is documented and is prepared for an eventuality of me not being there. It is possible for there to be a difference between not there at all and there. It is possible to be that I can't make that a priority anymore. So it has been a very evocative and interesting journey for me to take. The guy who was more than willing to drive 1,000 miles round trip for a single interview. And I just encourage people to take care of themselves and think about it. I have brought here, and I am keeping with me, a blood pressure cuff. I am happy to give anonymous readings. It really should be 120/80, and if it's not, you really need to talk to a person. You really do. I am on 6 medications, and none of them for my personality. So there's still something to be done, but they do things to me. They make me feel better. And I encourage people to please take care of themselves because the blorb will live without you, but why give it a head start? Anyway, thank you very much. How'd I do? That was the most anemic "you're running out of time" you've ever given. I didn't even see it.
Yeah, I gave up. I'm sorry. Yeah, so we have a break now, and for 10 minutes we're back for the assembly lightning talks, I think.
Yeah.
So I think we probably should actually give people the break time.
Do it.
10-minute break.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, I'm very sorry. One more thing. This is not really. So do you guys, okay, so I said this at the new product thing. Just like Kevin did that ridiculous experiment of reading Whiz Kids live. By the way, that is it's now the #1 rated Whiz Kids live performance currently, and the Playbill has rated it the #1 Playbill. Well, anyway, this thing I'm doing at 8 p.m. called Marathon is an experiment, and it's an experiment, and I would love for you to be a part of it. It is basically, we are going to set up 5 apples, and we are going to have a series of games and programs, and they have to get through them with their missions. And whoever stumbles through all 9 is the victorious super winner of who knows what it's useful for. I don't know. It's a lumberyard coupon. But it's more fun if people are part of it and are part of the experience. So you don't have to do anything if you're an audience member. Just enjoy watching the fun of our Apple games. So please consider doing it. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. So I have a microphone in one hand and I have a stopwatch in the other hand. And we are going to try and experiment here. So somebody, I can't remember who, suggested it'd be fun to have a bunch of lightning talks specifically on assembly language. And so that's what we're going to try and do. So we have 6 speakers, and we're going to try to stick to 5 minutes each plus one question if they can stay in their 5-minute box. And if not, then they don't get a question. If we have time at the end, then maybe we can circle back, and if there's more questions that they can answer, that'll be great. So we're going to start off with Mark Pilgrim. And so, Mark, take it away.
Hello. Hello. Soft switches. It's a common way. These 4 will put you on HGR page 1, and you can also use them for other soft switches to change to a bank switch in RAM, change to aux mem or main mem. You can use bit to hit the speaker at CO30. Very popular because it does not change the value of any register. And as you know, you only have 3 registers, so that you tend to use all 3 of them. Not always, but so I always tend to use bit for hitting soft switches. Obviously, for soft switches like disk-related things, COEC, to go get the value of the data latch, you actually want the value, presumably, so you need to use LDA. But for things where you just need to hit it so that something happens, like switching graphics modes or switching memory banks, you can use bit. Bit for hiding. This is a fun, cute obfuscation technique, but also a way to save 1 byte, potentially, depending on how your code is structured. This is taken from the RWTS code in Archon. So this is real code. This is production code that was used by Electronic Arts. And it's checking, comparing to DE, so it's looking for the epilogue after one of the sector fields. And then if that is equal, then it branches to 9BF. Well, if you look, 9BF, I mean, if you're looking at a listing, 9BF doesn't seem to exist. Like, that's in the middle of another instruction. But what it's doing is it's creating 2 code paths in 3 bytes. So if the epilogue, and otherwise it falls through, hits the set carry, and then the bit 18 acts as a 2-byte no-op. In the sense that it does change some flags, but it does not change the carry flag. So for the purposes of what we were, trying to decide, carry clear, meaning that the disk routine succeeded, carry set, meaning it failed, and all the other flags being ignored. This is a way of doing that. Bit for hacking. 16. JSR 8635. So I'm going to, on my copy, obviously, not the original disk, I'm going to change that JSR to a bit because, which is useful. Obviously, you could just use 3 no-ops, EA, EA, EA. I did that a lot in my youth, my misspent youth. But using bit instead functions as a 3-byte no-op. You use the absolute address version, which takes a 2-byte parameter. The previous one, this is actually the 0-page addressing mode of bit, which takes 1-byte parameter. But there's another one that takes 2 bytes. So it functions as a 3-byte no-op. And if you were wrong,
1 minute.
You can go back and change it because you still have the address there. So you don't have to go write anything down. You just have to change JSR, which is 20, to bit, which is 2C. That's not what bit is actually for. What it does is set 3 flags, the 0 flag, the overflow flag, and the sign flag. So this is code from an upcoming project, which I'll have a further demonstration of on Saturday, where I call a routine that to check how much memory you have. and it sets the carry flag if you have 128K, and otherwise it clears the carry flag. And then I take that and I rotate it into the high bit of a 0-page address. I have a similar thing for a joystick and rotate that in. So now the high 2 bits of that address are Boolean flags for me. So what if I bit that address? Well, it turns out that bit will take bits, the bit opcode will take bit 7, the highest bit of that, and set the sign bit. So I can say bit and then immediately branch saying no joystick. Or it will take bit 6 and put it, the bit opcode will take, will set the overflow bit to the value that was in this parameter, and then you can branch on that. Branch if overflow clear, branch if overflow set. So very simply, and without changing any registers, you can check, you can set Boolean flags in the 2 high bits of any memory address, and then check them and branch on them later.
All right. Next, we have Mark Lemmert.
Thank you. Hello. So what I have today is an optimization tip for anybody who's making the transition between being a competent 6502 code writer and a optimized code writer. And the example up here is illustrative of how I started to write code. You know, the first objective being, you know, write out the logic in such a way that it works, even if it's not the most efficient way to do it. What this code has going for it, which is in summary to toggle the volume flag variable between 0 and 1. If it's 0, we want it 1. If it's 1, we want it 0. What it has going for it is readability. Very readable, at least by assembly language standards. When I started to get into optimization, something that others impressed upon me many times was that optimization is a trade-off between memory, speed, disk space, and code readability. What this code doesn't have going for it is memory, and therefore in tandem disk space. Those usually go together, or often go together. Or speed, which may or may not be relevant. Speed may or may not be relevant depending on where you have the code in your routine. But it uses 19 bytes, and there's a way to do the same thing using only 8 bytes with really not too bad of a trade-off on the readability side. It just takes an extra mental leap. So we'll go take a look at an example here. So in this example, using only 8 bytes, we're toggling the volume flag between 0 and 1 using the EOR opcode or exclusive OR. And I'm going to take a look at, kind of pop the hood a little bit and show what's happening with the EOR, because I remember the point where I went from writing code like the first example to writing it like the second example. And my brain was in a state of, okay, I kind of logically understand what EOR does, but not well enough to be comfortable using it or necessarily instinctively know when to use it. So if anybody else is in a similar state, I thought it would be helpful to actually take a look at what's going on behind the scenes. So there's 2 basic scenarios that are occurring here. The volume flag is either going to be 0 or 1 when the routine starts. So in this scenario, volume flag is 0, and so we've got the binary expression of that there, along with applying the EOR of 1 in the binary expression. And the way EOR works is it returns a result of 1 in any bit position where both values in both the accumulator and the EOR value, if one of the 2 has a 1 in it, EOR returns a 1, but not if both have a 1. So we only have a 1 in the first bit position in one of the 2 values, so therefore it returns 1 into the accumulator, and we've therefore toggled the volume flag from 0 to 1, exactly what we want. And then the second scenario is the opposite, where volume flag comes in at a value of 1. Then we apply the EOR of 1. And since the rule stated before says that if both values have a 1 in any bit position, you're going to get a 0 back. That's exactly what happens. We get 0 in the accumulator, and volume is in the desired state. So that's it. Is there time for a question?
There is.
If there are any. Pretty straightforward stuff, but okay.
All right. Thank you, Mark. All right, Charles.
Oh, this guy again. Okay. So one of the things that you're going to have to do if you're ever creating anything with graphics is you're going to have to clear the screen. And in this case, we're going to do the low-res screen because that's where I like to live, in low-res, big blocky pixels and all. And so to get yourself a nice clean palette, nice clean canvas to run on, you're going to need to fill the screen. And the way to do that in the basic mode, not basic, but in the simplified assembly language mode, level 1 difficulty is to use the ROM routine. You look it up in the book. It says this is the routine you use to fill everybody on the screen with a particular color. So you load a color, which is another 0-page byte. Store it. Actually, it should be STA, whatever. And then you JSR to F832. And that will go across the screen, every pixel on the low-res screen, and fill it with that color that you loaded. And that's great, and you can watch it happen because it goes so slowly, because it takes 217,729 instructions to do that. And on a 1 megahertz machine, that's, what is that, 0.2 of a second, something like that. You can see it happening. But it takes like 4 bytes, so do it, right? I mean, you looked it up in the book. The book says this is how you fill the screen. And then you can go on and draw your pixels with whatever other drawing routine, character out or whatever the book says, and you've got your nice blank canvas. The next thing you can do is to crib from Compute! Magazine. And this is a slightly modified routine that I found from Compute. It was the fill screen fast routine, which instead of using a lookup table, it just has the values for the different lines of the low-res screen and fills them with your color at 78 hex bits or bytes at a time. So 400 to 478, 480 to whatever, 500, and it goes on and loops through that with the indirect addressing mode, which is something that you learn after you've read the first couple of chapters of the book and have found all the ROM routines that you need. And then you've got your first game and it's going really slow, and then you find out, oh, hey, there's this other way to do it. So this is great. This is really fast. It's only 5,403 instructions, which goes faster than the eye can see usually, unless you happen to catch it on a refresh cycle on your monitor. But in this case, it's nice and fast. It takes up a little bit more space in your code and thus on disk, but it's not so bad. The absolute fastest way to do it is the unroll the loops way. This is the, I'm going to gouge my eyes out if I have to type this all in by hand mode, where you load your color, and then you store it at 400, and then 401, and 402, and 403, and keep going until 478. And then you keep going again at 500, and then 580, and then eventually end up at 7F8, which is 960 addresses that you have to type in by hand, times 4 instructions each. That ends up as 3,842 instructions, which is the fastest way to do it. But it takes up, somebody can do the math, bytes of your code and thus memory for a savings of about 30%. So if you really want to do it that way, you could go onto advanced mode, which I don't have, which is the level in Doom where the guy's already like really raged up, and write some code that then writes this for you, so you don't have to write it. But you still have to write the code that writes it. So that's the advanced mode. How am I doing for time?
1 minute.
Any questions? All right, cool. So level 1, read the book. Level 2, finish the book. Level 3, hurt yourself. Don't hurt yourself.
Great. Next we have Forrest.
How do I change pages on the screen? Okay. This is an impossible talk in 5 minutes. The, yeah. Those are all the arithmetic instructions on the 6502. You'll notice there's no multiply and no divide. I was going to do this for a 256 byte number, but I discovered a gotcha, so I settled for the 64 bytes or 64 bits somebody suggested. Those are the routines that move a number from one area to another, zero the number, this is, by the way, very high order gloss, and that finds the highest bit in the number, or highest byte in the number that's got data in it. This is useful and not useful, but you can figure it out. It's not real code, obviously. There's no headers and getting ready. These are the add and subtract routines that use the numbers. By the way, these are stored in little Indian format, just like addresses are. First byte is the lowest order byte. Last byte is the highest order byte. And you have to do arithmetic from low order to high order when you're adding and subtracting, because your carry bits matter. Okay, the third thing here at the bottom, it's in two parts. Shifts in the left direction, which is the same as multiplying by 2. Much used. There's a summary thing. You'll be able to read it in the notes when they're published. Now, I did a sort of cross between pseudocode and code here for the multiply routine. I load the addresses into the addresses of the register, the fields in the memory, into 3 0-page pairs. Then I do my shifting and whatnot here. Arithmetic is not simple when you get to multiply. There's the simple way, which is very slow, like his thing. You want to multiply 10 by 20, you add 10 together to itself 20 times. Bingo, that's a multiply.
Vice versa.
What?
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa. In this instance, the other opposite end is you take, here's a fixed field, here's a fixed field, and here's another fixed field, and you write code that does it with comparing the two. That's a lot quicker, but it's sort of fixed. Here, what I'm doing is I'm finding the tops of the numbers, and then taking the first bit is there, it's multiplying, so I add it into a accumulator. Then I shift this. Is it a 1 or a 0? If it's a 0, I shift this and go on to the next bit. If it's a 1, I add it and then go on to the next bit, shifting. And it's just a shift, add, shift, add, shift, add. And it's a binary equivalent of our long multiplication. Now we get into the fun one, division. Division is a pain in the ass. You have to subtract multiple times if you want to do a real simple way. And that's a slower operation, lots and lots of times. And then when you get to the end and you suddenly find your result has gone negative, you have to add it back in again, and that's messy. So what you do instead is you line them up, and you look at you line up the largest bit in the two numbers, and you figure out how far you had to shift the divisor to make it that way. And then you move it down one, subtract. If the divisor's smaller than this, you subtract it, and you shift the results into your quotient. And it's all pretty well self-explained, but it takes 4 pages.
1 minute.
Thank you. And in the end, you end up with your 3 numbers. Your divisor's still there. Your dividend has gone away and been replaced by the remainder. And your product, or your quotient, is in the 3rd register. So there you have it. And as you see, it goes on and on and on. I'm in the process of writing the code to actually do this. Questions? If you followed that in detail and you understand it already, you're blessed.
What level of speed
It depends on, it's totally dependent upon your numbers. But this can be hundreds of times faster, maybe even thousands of times faster than just repeatedly subtracting. So, that it?
Thanks, Forrest. All right, you guys are doing great. All right, next we got Michael Sternberg.
All right, so I picked some code that I found while disassembling the Atari version of the Play-Doh terminal emulator that was released in the early 80s. I liked it because I like the way the stars aligned to come up with an elegant solution. Also, it should be accessible even if you're not overly familiar with assembly language. So the problem they were trying to solve was that the home computer was receiving a coordinate system from the original Play-Doh system that would be 512 by 512 and having to translate that into a 320 by 192 resolution. So for example, in the top right corner is 511, 511. It would have to be translated into, well, really 0, 191 on the Atari. So why did Play-Doh have a 512 by 512 resolution? Part of it was they had a pretty generous character bitmap, 16 by 8, and that gave them a 64 by 32 characters, and they were working off of a supercomputer that had 60-bit words and peripherals had 12-bit words. So 9 bits for the resolutions is just fine. So why did the Atari have a 320 by 192? It was really constrained by the NTSC signal, which goes back to the 50s, and so the TV would allow 352 visible half clocks. That's basically a pixel. If you take the Atari's 8 by 8 bitmap, 40 of those across is 320, and then 24 lines of that is 192. And so if you looked at the ratio between those two resolutions, you would see a 0.625 for the X resolution and 0.375 for the vertical resolution. And so this is where someone would, not thinking it through, might say, hey, lookup table, and have 2 arrays, 512 entries long, and the index of the input would point to what you want. But thinking about some of the commands available on the 6502, there are bit shifts. So one of the properties of binary numbers is if you shift all the bits one spot to the left, it effectively doubles the number. So on the top, there's a bit set in the 8th position and the 1's position that represents 9. You shift that over, it's in the 16th position and the 2 position now, and it's 18. And if you go the other way, you can half the number, like integer division. The least significant bit will follow into the carry. But if you step back and not look at it as a 0.625 and realize, hey, this is 5/8 and hey, this is 3/8. And if you look at 5/8 and 3/8, you can say, well, that's half plus 1/8, and that's 1/4 plus 1/8. And you can get those by shifting. So if you shift once, you get half. Shift again, you get 1/4, and so on. So this is the code that was used in the cartridge, and at the very top, it has the most significant byte from the Play-Doh X coordinate, which would be 0 through 511. Loads it into the A, shifts it to the right, and because that property of it dropping into the carry, so because 511 is 9 bits, that the most significant byte will only be at a maximum of 1, so that will shift into the carry, and that'll become important later on. And then the least significant bytes loaded into A. We'll can ignore the next step, but the rotate A will pull that 9th bit from the first one. From the most significant byte will get pulled from the carry, and that's saved for later on. So that was the first shift. That rotate right is the first shift, and then so they saved the 1/2, and then they do 2 more shifts to get to the 1/8.
1 minute.
Yep, and then And then you can see the add carry at the bottom where they add the results of the 1/2 and the 1/8 that would still in the accumulator. And then a little bit more math at the bottom to save it out for the most significant byte. But that's it.
Question? So, as an effect of this, on the Atari, does it just end up looking squashed?
It is squished. It is. They offered on the 48K model, they offered a second display of the resolution that you would pan around. Okay? And it looked, and that animation is pretty spectacular because how quickly you can do that. Thank you.
All right, we have to switch monitors here.
Okay, the concept for this, I think, was born when my brother got a color computer from Radio Shack and kept trying to find some way to prove that his computer was better, stronger, or faster than mine, my Apple IIe. So a friend and I, this is about 35 years ago, decided to see how fast we could just count digits. So that's a simple program in AppleSoft. Which just does this. And you can see the ones digit, you can't really read it. The tens digit is going pretty quick, but you can read it. The hundreds digit obviously takes its time. And that's just counting to 1,000. To duplicate what I did in assembly language, this is a somewhat more complex program which does the ones digit, and then it comes down here to do the tens and back to do the 1, and then 10, and then when this carries over, it does the hundreds and comes back. So it's got actually just a separate set of lines for each digit. So it's got the leading 0. And it seems to be roughly the same speed. But in assembly language, this is doing 5 digits instead of just 3 with no loop. And so it's got the same thing where it's doing the ones, and then it does the tens, and the hundreds, and the thousands, and the 10,000s. Just the same code duplicated for the next digit over. And that one, I don't know if this is just an artifact of Virtual 2, or if it would look the same on actual hardware. But the hundreds digit, did you notice that? I think it's just a stroboscopic effect on the hundreds digit there, that it looks like it's not changing, but the thousands digit you can see is very fast. And then to make the program smaller and put it into a loop, I did this, where I actually asked for a key press, just using the get call in AppleSoft to get a single digit. And I know that, but I'm also in ProDOS. So if I give it the same number of digits, this one, because it's in loops as opposed to just a direct code, that 100 digit you see changing. But I can also give it more digits. But you can see with the basic, just counting to 1,000, you know, the hundreds digit was
visible. And here, even to the thousandth digit, you can't read it. Got to come over here to be able to read the digit. So I think that's all I got. Any questions? My brother never was able to beat the Apple IIe. He found some poke that supposedly doubled the clock speed or something, and it still couldn't. There may have been some things where his basic beat AppleSoft, but it couldn't touch integer. Any others? No. No, neat thing with it. Now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 digits that you can't read.
I think one of the things that people said was that the number never appears on the screen because it's never touched, so they count. So maybe can't go faster.
Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention, if you look at where we're actually storing these digits, the screen address is 400, and it's loading at screen, Y. So rather than counting somewhere and then outputting to the screen, we were just changing the actual screen locations to maximize the speed. Any more? I guess that's it.
All right. Any questions for any of the speakers? Nothing. Okay. Well, let's thank all of. Oh, wait, Ivan. Yes. One more? Yes. Is everybody okay with that? We have time. Yeah. Go for it. Run. Run in a speedy way, or walk in a speedy way. I'm going to put you on the timer, though.
Put me on the timer.
All right.
Take less than 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
You got HDMI?
I don't have my adapter. Do you have
look
that?
at that.
That's what I just
You're
used.
wonderful.
Look at that.
Okay. 28 to 127 instead. So if that byte is said to represent a 2's complement number, as it is called, then it's a number. Then if the first bit is set, that means that it's a negative number. So what happens if you add 2 of these signed numbers together? Well, you might end up with a number that is greater than 127 or less than minus 128. And when that happens, you get an overflow. And guess what gets set? The overflow flag. Does that make sense to anyone? Does it not make sense to anyone? All right. That's most of it. If I don't finish the rest of it, that's okay. But quickly. All right. What triggers it? Only ADC or SBC upon what I just described, not if you're in 6502 decimal mode that I know you use. Okay. How do you clear it? CLV. How do you set it? There is no command to set it, but you can use, as Mark described, you can use bit against an address that has bit 6 set, and that will set it. So like you can use bit FF58, that contains a 60, and that will set the overflow flag. So that's what I usually do when I want to set it manually. There are only 2 other opcodes that affect it, which are PLP, which is pull processor status from stack, and RTI, which is like an RTS, but it also pulls up. So it's useful as a state toggle. Just beware of ROM calls, but it is not affected by INC, INX, or anything else for that matter. An obscure curio of it is that it can also be set by pulling in hardware pin 38 on a 6502 from high to low. That will set the overflow flag. It's sometimes called the SO pin, which stands for set overflow, and I don't know of anyone who actually implemented anything using that as a piece of hardware. That's it.
One of them said, we need an overflow. And the guy that was doing the
So they decided they needed it, but they decided they didn't need it so badly that they needed a set flag instruction for it. That's good. That's a good story. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. That was 2 minutes. Can anyone do an assembly talk in 1 minute?
We optimize Ivan.
All right, well, let's thank all of our speakers again. And now I think it's, what, time for dinner? Is that right? Dinner's at 5:30, and then we'll resume after that. All right, thanks.